In 2022, Sheena Patel published her debut novel, I'm a Fan, and was chosen as one of the Observer's top 10 best debut novelists. In the book, an unnamed narrator tells us about the similarly unnamed woman I am obsessed with and man I want to be with, in a tale of social media, obsessive love, power, privilege, and race. It's an incendiary novel, chosen by Foyles as their fiction book of the year, and one I knew would allow us to have a frank and sometimes funny conversation about where we find ourselves right now. Well, Sheena, it's great to speak to you about I'm a Fan. I'm wondering where to begin with this book, and I think I'd like to start with our protagonist, our unnamed protagonist, the narrator, because I'm really interested by the idea of having a main character who is somehow not the main character in her own life, and is very sort of isolated in a way from many things. And I want to ask, first of all, about how you set up writing the book and how you alighted upon this character who's sort of always somewhat on the margins.
Well, it's a mix of things really because it was in lockdown. Also, like nothing was happening, so you did feel like an observer anyway. So I definitely think like lockdown energy infused the writing of this. And then I was watching a lot of documentaries, and also, I think a lot of people know what that feeling is like before they're in their life, but they're waiting for their life to start. Like, I don't
Mm.
think that's too foreign a thought to anyone. Where you're like, oh, when this happens, then my life will begin. And it is like a whole vibe shift to just be like, no, I'm in my life and I have to I'm the one that can make it happen.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know, that was not really conscious really, but it is also just like the effect of the internet. The internet can also make you feel like social media. I mean, I say this as I consider myself as like the internet's girlfriend, so I'm not saying this like I hate the internet, but like social media can make you feel like you're on the edges of other people's lives.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if that's there, then that's maybe where it's from. But it's also like a very normal thought to be like a lonely kid and just feel like other people are like living the life that you should be living,
Mm.
and you're not quite sure how to get behind your own life or like what you should be or what you should be doing. I feel like that's quite normal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things that intrigued me first about your book was when I sort of picked up that it was about social media, or that it was, heavily influenced by. And obviously, as somebody whose life revolves around that, because it's my job, I'm always interested to read these sort of fictional representations of it. But what was really interesting to me was, whilst I did totally understand it, you're writing about somebody who has a completely different lived experience, if you like, to me, because you bring in some really interesting things about social media, which are to do with race and class. And you present a social media which we all know and understand, which is one which is populated by predominantly white people who are predominantly upper middle class or middle class and successful, telling people how to to live their lives, or presenting a version of life to which, I mean, I suppose even I feel slightly excluded from, but particularly your protagonist, as somebody of color who is not in those sort of echelons, but who desperately is sort of obsessed by them. And that adds a real, I don't know, energy and piquancy to the whole thing, because it makes it really charged with politics and race and class. That was clearly really important to you at the outset from writing this book. Was that the sort of the driving force, if you like, or one of them?
Yeah, I mean, politics is really important to me, obviously. I mean, it's important to everyone, but I take it quite seriously. I'm like a bit of a nerd when it comes to it. Like, I'll know people's names that you shouldn't know. Like, I'm like, oh, what's that guy in that ECRG group? And like that, I'm that person. Like, I know those things. Like, I really keep in touch with those things. I'm like, oh, I haven't heard from him for a while. Where is he? Like, I like know these things. Like, I like to know those things, and I like keep on top of it. But it's more just I was actually watching documentaries that I'm like so influenced by Adam Curtis, and just totally bewitched by him. Really, I just think he's a genius. And watch Can't Get You Out of My Head. An embarrassing. I'm too embarrassed to say how many times that is, because it's about 10 hours, so I don't want to say how many times I watched it. But it was more like that idea of telling the story of Brit. I mean, this makes me sound like a total dick, but like to tell the story of Britain through this one God, I sounded such a dick, but like, and then that sounds so grand, but it was more to tell the story of like this one of the country through a person. And also, really, what I wanted to do more actually than that was to bottle now, and to really bottle what it is to be now, live now, and also like this veneer of, oh, where everybody's out there celebrating their lives and everyone's just like doing their thing and it all feels quite nice. And I'm quite I mean, I'm in Jungian therapy, but I love Jungian therapy and this idea, like the ideas behind it of like shadow and persona and archetypes. And I love Dick and um books about like, you know, these women that get chewed up by artists, but like, I don't know, I was just like fucking love stories like that. And I was thinking about those kind of like timeless things about power and ambition and creativity. So it's like it's like all of the things I love and all of the things that I love I wanted to sort of write towards. So, and also tell the sort of, yes, it looks like everyone's celebrating and everyone's liking these things and everybody wants these things. But actually, do we want these things? Is it that we're all liking them? Like, is that really what's going on here? And how do you then, like, what's going on? Like, is this what it's saying it is? And also, Instagram's like shaped culture for like, I mean, it's TikTok now, but Instagram definitely like imprinted itself into culture, democratized celebrity. Like I wouldn't be writing without Instagram if I'm honest. As in, I'm in a collective and called Four Brown Girls Who Write, and we met in real life, and then we kind of self-published a book, and then we started to like tout it through Instagram. And Instagram was like it's an easy way to show other people or institutions like, I've got this many followers. This is how much value I can bring to you. It's how the publishing industry works, to be honest. Like, if I'm going to be brutal about it, but that, you know, the publishing industry asks people that can't write but who have huge followings to write books, and have distorted culture in that way, in which people who can write captions are writing books. Like, that makes me sound quite rude, but but it does make it sound rude. But and there's a lot of people who probably can write who haven't got the Instagram followers, that can't get the traction, and it's like, what is that doing to culture? Because there's people's voices who need to be heard that haven't got the numbers behind them, and then find it hard to get published. Because if I didn't have my collective, I wouldn't have been able to get, you know, it was a real struggle. And the publishing industry was this whole foreign country to me. I just didn't know how to get into it. So we had to make our own vibe, basically. We had to make our own scene, and then, which meant that people came to us. So like we had the Tate, we did a talk for the Tate over lockdown. It was like these institutions started to come to us because we had a bit of energy around us. So it's just, you know, and so you kind of harness the power of social media in that way to get what you want. So I was thinking about all of those things, and like, if you are asking people to, we've gone massively off the question, but if you are asking people to write books that have huge followings, exactly like what narratively, what, and culturally, what are we saying, and what is the conversation, and where are we going? Because then, and who's setting that narrative, and who's setting those channels? You know, like, what kind of conversation are we having, and who is actually challenging anything? Because everyone's got a vested interest to keep it going. So it was quite interesting to have like no vested interest and really attack everything. Because I didn't owe anybody anything at all. So I could write a character that was absolutely like, burn everything, absolutely burn the lot of you, burn even the people that I look like, burn the ones that I want the admission, you know, all of that. It was just burn it all. And actually say, what would I say if I had nothing to lose? And it took a long time, to figure out what to say and how to say it. But it was so much fun writing it. It's really fun to write when you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I suppose the first thing is this idea of what really powers social media is sort of fandom, if you like, which this book is about in many, many ways. So, as you say, that there are these people on social media who have been lifted up by their followings to the point where they can be given, as you say, a publishing contract because any publisher can look at those figures and go,
Yeah.
well, we only
Well,
need
that's a
to
guarantee. It was a
sell.
10%. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
10% of that following, and then and there's like this creativity, this like beautiful nebulous creativity is then boiled down to the market, and it's
Hmm.
like, and what I was trying to attack was liberalism, and it's like all of you lot who think you're not racist, you're actually doing, you're all implicated into this system. You think, oh, it's about supporting voices and wow, and it's like, no, it's not. It's about you making a profit. Actually, I don't mean
Yeah.
you. I don't mean like Waterstones. Please buy my book, but it's but it's just it was more that it was like, how is this what this is saying it is, and are the words that people say, like how much of this is performative,
Mm.
and the performativity of even the liberal classes I was after as well, like, yeah, because it starts to get down to like numbers and money, and that's what I was interested in kind of interrogating, really.
What's really interesting is the emptiness of some fandoms, I think, because as you say, you have these people who've got these huge followings, and they might write a book and it'll be published. But then it's really interesting to see sometimes when those books don't work, they don't. Nobody buys them because even
Yeah.
the fandom has got no interest in really
No.
buying that
Yeah.
book. All they can do very easily is to follow and to like something because it doesn't cost you anything to do that.
No.
But the
Yeah.
minute you're asked to part with a bit of cash, they're just like, "Oh no,
Oh no,
move
it's
on
all
to the
right.
next thing." So you kind of go,
Yeah.
well, "What's that? What does that mean? What is that fandom?" It's just so pointless.
Well, I think it's just like extra work. Well, that's what I mean, and then the numbers become irrelevant because that's not actually the thing. People don't know what they need, and people don't know what they want, and that's the weird thing about making anything, is that you don't know. A lot of it is luck, like how it strikes in the culture, and numbers don't really lend themselves to that.
Mm.
So then the publishing industry, everything, films, whatever creative industry you want to, art, the art world, whatever, fashion, models, writers, they all get caught in this system where it's like, well, I've had people DM me and be like, well, I haven't got a lot of followers and no one's going to pay me attention. It's like, I don't know how do you break this? It's like so hard to break this thing. And actually what you need is people like, Nina Hervé from Rough Trade Books, who, and Simone, he's a publisher in Italy, published the book in Italy. He's kind of the same like Nina. They like spot something in people, and they
Mm.
see, like, Nina saw something in me. I mean, I chased her down, to be fair, but she also was like, Sheena, write a book, like just write a book. Like I sent her a couple of pages, and she was like, write a book, and I'll publish it, whatever it is, we'll publish it. And
Mm.
it's like you need people like that actually like vibe nerds, and I see something in you. You need people that have got a bit of sense about them to believe in you and invest themselves into you, rather than someone being like, well, you've got 100,000 followers or whatever. It's like there's no soul in that, I don't think. You need people like Simone, but Simone does that. He's got this writer that he's found from somewhere, and a mate that was like a social media manager for him but wanted to be an editor, and he's like invested himself into like supporting the writer and turning this other boy into an editor. It's like that takes so much energy, that's like almost being a father. It's very like parental energy to do that. Like
Yeah,
that takes energy.
yeah. As you said, it's sort of almost like mentoring, isn't it? To sort of put
Yeah.
your wing around somebody and go, right, well, let's make this
Right, we're gonna
happen.
do this thing.
So you obviously that kind of support from there, and I wonder as well the support from your collective,
Yeah.
presumably very important for you to have got to publication.
Yeah. Well, we published a book of well, we self-published a thing, then we put out like a little pamphlet to we took a show to the Fringe and we fundraised on Instagram, and then we made a little booklet to give to people who fundraised for us as a gift. So we wrote like an essay each. So that sort of introduced me to like prose writing because I'd never felt very comfortable with it. And then we did a set of pamphlets with Nina with Rough Trade Books, and then that's when I sort of was like between prose and poetry, and then I did I'm a Fan. So there was like stuff happening before I'm a Fan, but yeah, like without the girls, I wouldn't have thought that I could write. Like we turned ourselves into writers. Basically, we
Mm.
were just like, "You're a writer. I'll listen to you." And we've like developed. You know what I mean. You just need somebody to be like, "I believe in you."
Yeah.
And so we've had. It's a real like. It's very witchy when we're together. Well, I'm really lucky to have them, and Nina. I'm like so lucky to have met them.
Mm.
Because I feel like I come with a backup, so I don't need anybody else's approval really. So I have theirs.
We've spoken a little bit about how our narrator sort of, well, as she refers to this other character, the woman I am obsessed with, and one of the reasons why she's obsessed with her is to do with this Instagram persona that she is sharing online. But of course, the other reason is that she is in a relationship with the other character, the man I want to be with, and time for us to talk a little bit about him. We were joking just beforehand about how awful men can be. He is awful in many ways, and I wondered where. I suppose this it's not so much that it's obsessive love for him, but it's this idea of her being in this relationship with somebody who's not available because he's married and has other lovers, but also he always seems to be in control of what relationship she's allowed to have with him.
with him, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about writing that.
Well, I mean, it's not really a trope that's anything unfamiliar, to be fair. Like Picasso was supposed to be like that. Lucian Freud's supposed to be like that. Like Cecilia Paul writes about that. There's a lot of men that are like that have a lot of cultural power, but then are quite regressive in the way that they treat women, and also then that the women want to be near that immortality in a way.
Hmm.
Um, and so it becomes like this whole dance. Like it's not. I've just taken something that's actually quite recognizable and just put the internet into it. I don't think it's anything that's, you know what I mean, like this. And also the fact that other women and girls are coming up to me and saying, like, I know, they know this relationship. There's obviously something baked into the culture where, men are like these pieces of glass that walk around, but yet they're very protected, and also seem, just because they're men, they're the prize in a way.
Hmm.
And that it's very interesting because, like, in films and books and things, it's always the men running after the women, but I think in real life it's always women running after men. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's actually sometimes what it's like,
Yeah,
is that a man can somehow become like a trophy, and like, I'm okay, I've got him, kind of thing. There's a buffer, and that's only because so much community support has been decimated that actually a relationship's the only way that you can have any access to care. So having a
mm.
man is like, I get love, I get sex, I get protection, I get money, I could get a baby or whatever it is. And so the man's just like, well, I know you can get all of this from me, so I'm going to hold myself off because I know you want all of this. And so there's this like weird power dynamic. Like, he doesn't need to be, he could be like Steve from the fucking HR office. I don't know. It's not really like, because this guy's so renowned that it could just be anyone, and it's just accentuated because he has cultural power. And that becomes the thing that she wants through him. It's not, I don't even know if she wants him. It's like she wants the thing that he is,
Yeah,
which is sort of like speaks to I Love Dick, where she becomes obsessed with Dick,
yeah.
and she starts to write to him, and also it spins that whole muse thing on its head, where the woman is like this passive muse, and it's the man that's the active one. Actually, even though yes, he has a lot of power, she's the one that's writing the story. So it
Mm,
does, and she's the one who's telling you who he is, and she's the one that's not named him. She's like dehumanized him in a way and turned him into a symbol. So
mm,
there is an interesting power play even within the shape of the story. I think that she's not so helpless, even if she is helpless.
mm. It's interesting you mentioned the sort of those inspirations of the very famous artists who wielded that kind of cultural power, but it's not restricted to those types of men, is it? This sort
No,
of
no, not
this
at all. It's
power
like,
play.
it's any man, because like, how can, not everyone's been in a relationship with an artist. It's like, it's not that. It wouldn't, I wouldn't, I know people hate the book. I do know that, and I did write it thinking I want people to hate it. Um, I didn't write it to be a book that people would love. I wanted people to feel sick when they read it. I didn't want
Mm,
it to be a pleasant experience. This isn't supposed to be like a safe place to like feel good about the world. It's supposed to be full of people that are horrible and who act badly. But it's not just that. Every girl has a girl that they don't follow on Instagram, and who they kind of hate follow, and who they envy, and who they kind of track alongside their own life. And every girl who is straight or whether has been in a relationship with someone like this, or has had a
mm,
relationship like this. So it's not really outside of it's not anything special. It's just written about, it's just like shown that it's not always the woman that's walking around being the prize. It's actually the men, and it's the women that are running after them. And
Yeah.
it's not just these like the status just heightens it all, but actually a man on his own is also just that, as a, you know, is sort of protected and buffered from growing up.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there's this biological power that men have as well, isn't there? Which is, and as you say, that because they're so cosseted, they can be quite immature when it
Yeah.
comes to relationships. And so that often there will be these women you read about in, well, not even read about in books, but who you know in life, who
Yeah.
have spent time with a man who has spent his time kind of umming and erring about settling down and committing and having babies, and then at the 11th hour deciding, nah, I'm not quite
I'm all
ready yet.
right.
And of
Yeah, and
course, for
she's
the
like,
woman,
fuck! I'm fucking 39, you fucking prick. I raised you for 5 years. And now you're gonna fuck me over. Yeah, it happens all the time. And I like, yeah, it absolutely happens all the time. And women raise men, you know.
Mhm. Why is it? Do you think that men? I mean, this is Will. This is not your question to answer. You don't
I
have
feel
to
like
answer
this is
it.
my question to ask you. Why is it that men? Why are men like this? Please answer, Will. Tell me why men are like this. As
I,
a representative of your gender, tell me why they're like this, please. Can you fix them? Can you find me one that's also not broken?
yeah. Well, boy, did I paint myself into a corner
I know
there.
you did there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that. It's not for me to answer. I don't know why they're like that. I don't know why they're
No,
like
no,
this.
with this, yeah, not. I suppose not realizing that.
Do you know what it is? But I say it in the book. It's like, for men, I think time is infinity.
Yeah,
And men are brought up to think that it doesn't matter what age I am, I'm desirable. You can be 18, you can be like, I can have a child. But women are taught that, you know, 35, bang, you're out.
yeah.
And that's essentially, and I think that's what I was interested in. I mean, that, and I have cribbed that from motherhood, but I was interested in that idea of like, and that's connected to capitalism and productivity. You're only as good as when you're productive. And
Hmm.
I just think those two experience, you know, men and women are living on two different timelines. And I think that's what it is, to be honest. It's biological, and you can't get away from your biology.
No.
You can't get away from the fact that a person with a womb, a woman, um like after 40, 42, that's it, you're out. You
Hmm.
can't get away from that. And that then determines the power dynamic between men and women in heterosexual relationships. So
Hmm.
it's like, it doesn't matter how much progress is made without, you know, I can't get away from that. So it's a trap, isn't it? It's like being told when you're younger, you can do anything, you can do anything you want, anything that a man can do, you can do. And it's like, it really isn't. Maybe you should tell me the truth from the outset. It would make life a bit easier. It's not that. It ain't that. Not that that, you know, that there's inherent difference. I think women are incredible. I love being in a room full of women. I think it's amazing. Women are the best. But it's just that um it's just the dissemination of power, I guess.
Yeah, you've sort of brought us back to some of the politics that you mentioned at the beginning, and you said that there was something very freeing about writing something where you didn't care whether people liked it or not, and that you didn't have to
No.
worry about that reaction. But I suppose what that means is that,
I mean, that was
well,
also in part because like no one knew who I was, so it
yeah,
didn't really matter. I had absolutely nothing to lose because no one like I had nothing to lose because I had nothing. So I was just like, okay, we're gonna write all of the worst things because yeah, there's like nothing. Sorry, I cut you off.
well, I was just going to say. So, what it means is that your narrator is telling the truth about the world, but of course, at the same time, your narrator is a character who is seen probably by many to be slightly
Unhinged,
unhinged.
yeah.
And were you ever worried about that sort of that razor edge of like, or do you just kind of go, if you think the person who's telling the truth is deranged, then that's on you, kind of thing.
Well, actually, like to be honest, I didn't really think about what other people would think about it, and
Hmm.
also, and I made a joke out of it. But obviously, like no one knew I was right. I didn't tell anybody I was writing. No one knows who I am, so it didn't. It's a kind of a weird. You can't. I don't think you can think about how other people are going to take something that you're writing or making as you're making or writing it.
Hmm.
Like you can only make and write it, and then make it the most true or the most authentic thing that you can make, and then give it to the world and then let go of the meaning of it. Like
Mm.
to think that's such a conscious thought to think, what will people think of this character? I was just like, no, it's just going to, the only thing I thought about was like anything that she did or that was done to her, the opposite has to happen in the next chapter.
Hmm.
And so nothing was set. So if you think she's truthful there, the next thing she'll do is absolutely mad. And then, and it just kept moving. And it's like, oh, if you think the sympathy's with her, the next time the sympathy's going to be with some other person. And so I wanted truth to keep moving and
Hmm.
for it to keep um, twisting itself through the book. And I definitely did write it to, it's not meant to be somebody who's likable, and also I don't know why a woman has to be likable, even though I know at the minute culture's just full of unlikable narrators. But I find I'm since the women's prize thing, I'm having more readers being like, they're not likable, but it's like, but why do you need it to be likable? I don't really
Yeah.
understand it. There's People aren't the best versions of themselves sometimes, and there are periods in your life where you can have 10 years happen to you in 1 year, and you were just like the absolute worst version of yourself, and this is just like that of this person.
Yeah.
um we don't always act in the best way possible. We're also not, as people, as human beings, we're not all one thing, we're many things.
I've always found the whole likable narrator thing bizarre. The sort of
Yeah, it's
obsession
just
with it.
it's very strange, and also, I mean, it's definitely come from like, I mean, I think TV, to be honest, has definitely widened that. I really do think TV is like a real leader in culture. And I do
Yeah.
think TV has got more space for unlikable characters than books. With books, it seems to be like you need somebody that you're on the side of. And actually, it was political to make her unlikable, to be honest, because why, black and brown characters, especially brown characters, are often these quite like meek heroes
Yeah.
who are, where things happen to them and they suffer, and they're plucky. And I didn't want to write somebody who was grateful. I wanted to write somebody who was like absolutely could probably be deported. And it was like, it was against the backdrop of like Shemima Begum, and like her having been groomed. Now it turned out that she'd been groomed, but like a year, it just felt really wrong to me what had happened to her. And like, if
Mm.
she's done what she's done, she should be tried here. She's British, and for her to be stripped of her citizenship just like chilled me to the bone. And I just thought, like, I was writing towards that as well. Like, I don't know her. I do think she's a very important person to us. I think she should come home and be tried here. She shouldn't be where she is. Her child died. Like, those are political decisions that, political decisions have had effect on her life.
Yeah.
And I kind of wrote thinking about that, about why a brown person had to be, or a non-white person has to be likable. Because I just don't think they have to be. And I think there is something about being grateful to be here. And I just was like, fuck it. I don't want to be grateful to be. I want to write someone who's just free of that prison of needing to be likable, of like trying really hard and distorting yourself in order to be approved of. It was like, fuck it. Who would you be if you didn't have to be approved of? If you didn't
Mm.
have to be good? What kind of freedom was there in that? So, and I'm someone who desperately wants to be liked. So it was quite interesting. It was quite interesting to write someone who didn't care.
You've reminded me of one of the bits of the book which I found incredibly powerful. I mean, there's lots of powerful moments in this book. There was one chapter though, which is called "There's No Business Like,"
Mm,
which felt, and this is a real danger to think that anything that any writer writes is them literally speaking to you, but it felt like it came from somewhere very personal, and you can tell me whether that's true or not. But in that chapter you talk about Shemima Begum and some other real people, their experiences, but what you're talking about is race, and you're talking about writers being willing to use parts of their selves or their culture in order to get
yeah,
appreciation
approval.
or
Yeah,
publishing contracts or whatever, and that whatever they give them will always be too little,
yeah.
especially given how much they've given in return for it. Tell me a little bit about that chapter, where it comes from, how personal it is, and then we'll talk about how it relates to where we are now.
Well, it was. I mean, I read Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. She's American. She's an Asian American, and I it's a bunch of essays are incredible, and they're basically writing about that idea of like narrative, and who sets the narrative, and how, what stories are we telling. Basically, it's a bit like she was in a spaceship looking at Earth, and she's telling you, like, she has this grand view of what we're doing.
Mm.
And I read that book and I honestly felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion, and I felt very sick when I read it. And I thought all the things I was doing were really radical. And actually, I was like, shit, have I just been playing into this whole machine? I've actually just been giving the machine what it wants. And I'm actually not a threat. I thought I was a threat, but I'm not a threat. I'm doing exactly what it is I'm supposed to be doing, which is
Mm.
to be talking about my history and my family and my vulnerability and all of that. And I felt absolutely disgusted with myself. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe that maybe this is what I've been doing. I've not been challenging anything. And so that's where it kind of came from. That's sort of where it came from. Was like, how do you challenge? And also, I guess it's like the nub of the book, really, because it talks to like her voice. And um, I don't even know if it needs to be personal. It's just I wanted to say something.
Mm.
Again, this is very bombastic. I kind of feel embarrassed, but I wanted to say something that hadn't been said before.
Yeah.
And it took me, I wrote that almost at the beginning, a version of it, and it took me a year, it took me 12 whole months to actually get down to what it was that I was trying to say, because I couldn't get down to it. And the experience of writing it was like being a sculptor with like a piece of stone. And I was just like, I know what it is I'm trying to say, I just can't get to it. And it was just
Mm.
like chipping at this idea. And then the final thing, like what it is in the book, and when I got there, I was like this sense of just overwhelming relief at like having done it. A fan base is how we will get the advances, how we secure the invitations to prestigious awards, headline one of the smaller tents at the bigger literary festivals, or one day maybe we will even get to cosplay at being a gatekeeper by becoming one of the judges of a well-regarded prize. We think explaining ourselves or justifying our existence isn't too heavy a price to pay to gain entry through those gilded gates where liberal artsy white people will token us as a symbol of their ideological progress. They can think they're so exotic for being into your work, aren't they so edgy, so underground, or else most likely they will tiptoe around us, deferential but still exclusionary. It's not such a high price for admittance to the cultural establishment, we reason. If we specialise in telling others what the world is really like, a race relation, it's not really such a burden to spin these pornographic trauma ballads for a little bit of status. We are saddened by the knowledge that nothing really collectively changes, but reassured by the thought that it did for me on an individual level as we backstroke across the vast placid sea of righteous superiority. And it was just like that idea of like institutions and crying in front of institutions, and in a way like writing is crying. And it's just how, again, it's about commodities and capitalism, and social media just is designed to make you chop yourself up into bits and like sell yourself. And in a way, the creative industries does that too. It's like, well, we would like a story about, you know, you coming here from another place, like your parents having come here and you suffering racism and you not feeling like you're beautiful and da da da. It's like, but how many of us can tell that story? How
Mm.
many of us need to tell that same story? We're all telling the same stories. Like, what is a new story for us to tell? And who would we be if it wasn't for the approval of white people or the institutions or whatever? You know, like what stories could I have told if I had never been born here?
Mm.
Or I am so grateful to have been born here because I'm able to tell this story. Like, it's just really confusing and complicated, but I don't know if about personal. It's just I wanted to say something
Mm.
new, and I wanted to say something scary. I wanted to say something to scare myself, because the process of writing this book is also that chapter for me. You know, like I read that and it's like doing a talk and da 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 da. It's like I'm attacking myself. So I didn't want to let myself off either. I
Right.
just didn't want anybody or even myself to feel good or feel morally superior to anyone else, least of all myself. So she's hard on me too. She's hard on me too. So she attacks me too when I read it, because I'm like, fuck, what am I doing?
That's. I mean, I think that's probably why that chapter, if you like, hit so hard, because it felt like you were absolutely putting yourself on the rack
Yeah,
and kind of going, "I'm guilty of this." Of
I
course,
am guilty of it. But I
here
am
I
guilty
am
of it.
I'm already been the representative of men,
Yeah.
now white men, and now of course Waterstones. So this idea, as you say, of like writers of color giving away these pieces of themselves so that they can be on a prize shortlist or maybe appear at
Exactly.
a festival on a
Or
minor
like on this
slot.
podcast, and I can be
Or,
like, oh, I
or
was on Waterstones podcast. Look at me, I'm doing so well. And it's like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Really, what am I doing here? No, I'm joking. But it's just it's sort of like, so I can feel what? So I can feel better than other people. So I can
Mm.
feel like I'm getting ahead. You know what I mean? Who am I leaving behind? Why can't I take them with me? Why can't I be hosting this podcast?
In many ways, perhaps you are, Sheena. I'm merely your guest.
You're merely my guest. So,
Yeah.
Will, what's wrong with men?
Yeah, well, quite. I said we haven't got. I thought I'd managed to evade that question.
um, yeah, I don't know. But why did it strike you? You tell me, because you said before that it struck
Well,
you.
I thought it. I thought it was incredibly powerful because, as you say, you absolutely put yourself in the spotlight. It felt like, but also you absolutely put everybody in front of that firing line. The whole idea of, well, I suppose of like what is it to put something personal into art? And as you've been asking yourself, so why am I doing that? What is the purpose of that? Is it for the fandom? Is it for the adulation? Is it for the success? What's ironic, of course, is that, as you say, you wrote this book without anybody knowing who you were in your head, and not even knowing exactly how it might be published. It
Mm,
has been published, and now it's been awarded Book of the Year by Foyles. It's now been moved to another publisher, so here we have the paperback coming from a bigger
granted.
publisher, if you like, still an
Yeah.
independent but a bigger one. And so, of course, now you're starting to see, I suppose, some of the benefits of being truthful, of saying something difficult, and of but what does that mean for you as an artist? Is
Well,
that, are you
exactly. I
happy
don't
with that,
know.
or
I don't know. I don't know. It's a very weird. It's a very weird thing. It's a very weird thing because that's what I saw of stories that were surrounding me from that would that was I was just like, I just can't read another story like this. I
mm,
just can't, and I don't want to write one. And I think I
mm,
was writing them. But also, I've always been very, very enraptured by now. I was never very interested in the past. Also, I can't really remember the past. Like, I have a very shit memory. Also, I just can't remember anything. And so I was also very like, what is it now? Like, who are we now? What are we?
mm,
What are we in this? Not in the 70s, not in the 80s, not when I was a kid. What are we now? Who am I now? I want now.
mm.
And I don't know. I've kind of avoided your question. I don't really know. I am uncomfortable by it because I feel like she's watching me, and I feel a bit like but I want the things,
Right.
so let me off. And I just feel a bit. I do feel like she's kind of judging me a bit. I do feel like that.
Is there something to be said for the fact that, as you said, like the question is, why am I doing this, and or why would I do this? Why would I put this out there? And
Oh
if
no, I
as
stand by putting it out there. I think it's like you say, the Granta thing, the foils thing. It's like that. It's like that. Does that corrode you? Does that corrode your ability? Because like, how much of the system are you in? I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm not like Douglas Stewart. I'm not I'm not huge, but it's like even these little wins. You're just like,
yeah,
but how once you become a part of any system, you become it. Your ability to tell the truth is compromised. It is because you're invested in the system. um so I think that's I worry about that.
are you able to sort of square it with, as long as you're continuing to have that kind of thought in your head, which is, I'm going to sit down and write as if I don't care,
I have
as long as I'm
invested,
saying something
yeah.
that's truthful, as long as it's still art and not
Yeah,
a book being published because you've got 100,000 followers on Instagram, then it's got some value to it.
I hope so. I hope so. I
I mean,
hope it
obviously, you'll have a problem when you do hit 100,000 followers on Instagram, because
it
then.
won't ever happen. That won't ever happen. I don't have that kind of life where I would get 100,000 followers. I just share memes. I'm a meme lord, that's it. um uh but yeah, I mean, it was more like it was like a burn everything. It really was. She was just a burn everything person,
Mm,
and it wasn't so much personal as it was just being. It's female fury. It's female anger, which is something that we're denied.
hmm
I think female anger. And so this is just a voice in their rage. And actually, like, if you think of rage as fire, fire is very, it's dangerous, it's cleansing.
Yeah.
So there's something kind of, I don't know, freeing about it in a way. It's a character. So I mean, I'm not her because she's terrifying, and I wouldn't speak that way to I wouldn't really speak that way to anyone. Um, and also, I feel judged by her. Like she kind of stands over me a little bit.
Fire can also, of course, be an important part of regrowth. As you know, as you say, it's a cleansing thing, but also it can help forests to grow properly again. Do you feel, for you creatively, that you know where you're going next after this book and what you want to do next and say next?
No, I mean, I wish I could be one of those people that were like, I'm working on my next book, but um, I'm not, and I find it very painful to write at the moment. Like the words come, but they come like excruciatingly slow.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the book, it was like it was flooding out of me. I was just like, and for years it's been like that because I think no one's watched me, and now the words are quite. It's quite. I feel very empty.
Hmm.
But I was talking to a so on the I was on Tears for Fears, which is Ella Frears' podcast. I was on the podcast today, and one of the poets, his name's Richard Scott. He's got a book coming out, and it's been like 5 or 6 years since he's published.
Hmm.
And we were at a party like like a few months ago, and he was just saying like we were talking about this like rate of books, like people who have a high rate of books, and I was just like I feel really worried, like I don't know, the words have gone, like I just feel really scared I'm never going to write again. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he was just like, how many books do you want to publish in your life? And I was like, that's such, and I think about that question so much, and it's
Hmm.
like I don't actually think I want, I only want to publish when I've got something to say. Because I think again you can get hooked onto the publicity of like being visible or being seen as somebody that's like on the talks, on the panels, and doing well. And I guess it's like again performativity. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously some people are like really, really prolific, and I wish I was one of those people. Um, but I would, for me, it was like I'd only want to publish something when I have something to say. And in this book, I really had something to say. I'd like a central argument and a question I was asking myself,
Hmm.
and I just asked that through this person. And um, yeah, I just hope it happens to me again.
That's interesting. I was talking to the writer Tom Ben the other day after he won the Sunday Times Young Writer Award,
Oh
and
yeah,
he'd written 4 books in pretty quick succession in his early 20s. And then he'd been writing other stuff, but it had taken 8 years for his new book to be written. And I asked him about that, and he just said it just took that long to write. Like it just that's the time it took.
yeah,
It was a different kind of book, and he wanted to do it justice. And as you say, there's no point just bashing it out for the sake of it. If like God forbid, like when you're one of those book a year authors and you have to
yeah,
deliver that manuscript every 12 months, that must be exhausting. Um,
yeah, yeah. And I just think yes, it's a and I did this thing, I did this talk at a festival, and I'm like, it was like being at uni. It was kind of amazing. It was like you'd come out of your dorm room, and I had like the lead singer from Mogwai staying opposite me, and I was like, oh, I'm dying. And then this this woman who was in charge of us, she came. She was with a poet, and then she left us talking, and so we were just talking outside my door. He had a book coming out, and he was just like a really magic person. And he was saying that he puts a book out every 10 years, and I was like, by God, how do you feel about that? Like, how does that feel for you? And he was just like, well, it just takes the time it takes. It's like
mm.
he was like, I don't want to go faster than that. And he was like, maybe I'll start writing again in the next 5 years. And I was like, that's an incredible experience of time where 5 years feels quite like soon.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, again, it's like the machine just expects you to just keep churning things. And actually, maybe, like, I've just been in Rome for 6 weeks, and the speed they go, I was like, why am I, the speed I was going compared to the speed they were going? I was like, why am I charging about? I don't understand. I was like, full London speed. I was like, slow down. Where are you going? And it's even that. It's like, how quick are we supposed to actually be going? I don't
Mm.
know. I just really hope I write again. Like, I write a book again one day.
Well, so do I, Sheena, because I'm a fan.
Hey, you did it.
No, I really hope you do. This book, as I say, it sort of blew me away, and despite being almost the antithesis of the right audience for it, in terms of what it's sort of tackling, I thought it was, there's just so much to talk about. We've scratched the surface this afternoon, but I look forward to seeing what you do next.
Oh, no, thank you for having me.
I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel is out now.